Hello everyone, it's day 15 and today we're gonna go through the day 2 of learning the client first from the Finsweet documentation. And let's go. The next chapter is the typography strategy, and we're gonna learn about how to use typography the client first way. And let's go. Build and maintain a unified typography style system across the project. HTML tags are default. Okay. Typography should be our project's most simple and organized type of utility system. Websites with unified typography system help us to be clear to the user. We can think of HTML typography tags as our default typography values. Okay, these are the default H1 headings, the HTML tags. Okay. In a perfect world, we would never have to put a class on a heading or text element. Following the default typography in our instance would result in a clean and organized project. However, it's common for brand designs to have variations and customizations for different instances of text. We use a class when there is a variation from the default typography style. A class changes the default typography value. For example, a global utility class such as text size medium. Okay, we can see here when we give this paragraph the text size medium class, the text is getting bigger. I guess this is the regular font. When we give the class, it's getting bigger. Okay. We apply text size medium to the text element because the size of a variation from the default body font size. Okay. Utility classes to customize the default. We use global utility typography styles to help unify, organize, and manage these typography variations. Client first comes with a global utility class system to get us started with typography organization. We use text and heading as prefixes for our typography utility classes. Benefits of client first typography system. Global management. Globally manage the important CSS properties that make up the typography variations. We can make global site-wide typography changes by changing one single value. Okay, makes sense. Prevents unnecessary class creation. Prevent duplicate class creation for reused styles. Global utility classes will reduce the number of custom typography classes created. For example, text color brand. You can see here. We give this heading the text color brand utility class. And the color turns to the brand color. So basically we want to use this utility class so we don't create any other classes. We want to keep our class structure clean and as minimal as possible. This will help us have more scalable and organized project that will be easily it will be easy to customize. We want to avoid creating multiple custom classes that manage our text color blue. Yeah. We want uh, as less custom classes as possible because our style folders will be full of classes. It will be very hard to manage. Workflow speed and organization. We can search for and manage our typography class in the design styles panel by typing the prefix text or heading. This allows us to use typography class in our workflow quickly. Okay. This prefix naming convention helps us manage our typography inside the Styles panel search and folders. We can organize our typography utility class in a dedicated folder structure. Typography organization enables us to work faster and more efficiently inside Designer. Okay, reasons to customize the default typography. Variation in style. The most common reason. When there is a style variation to the default typography element, we may want to apply a global utility class. We can use one or more global utility classes to customize the next instance. Example, text color primary, text weight semi-bold. Okay, we can see here. First we change the color with the text color brand, and then we make it bold with the text with the text weight semi-bold utility class. We make it bold after we change the color to our brand color. Okay, makes sense. By adding different class combinations to the typography element, we have many options to style our text. Most of our headings should be without a class when possible. The more we use the default style, the more unified our typography is. Okay, I think this is important. They say again that we should have we shouldn't have a lot of classes. We must try to keep it as low as possible. And everything will be more unified if we use the default styles. But sometimes we want to change the color of a heading, and then we can use another utility classes or make a custom class. But we should try to do it as least as possible. Heading tag for SEO does not match heading tag in design. For example, we need to use an H1 tag for the page title. The H1 is required for SEO and page crawling. However, the styles of this title should allow the H2 styles of the project. Should follow the H1 styles of the project. Okay. We have a conflict where the SEO required heading tag needs the default styles from a different heading tag. We can apply heading style H2 to the H1 element to mimic the H2 style while maintaining the H1 tag for SEO. Okay, so we are trying to not change the tag, but change the style with the H2 style class. Okay, makes sense because for the SEO it's important this to remain H1 heading. This H1. So we change the style with the H2 style tag, H2 style class. Makes sense? I understand this. Heading style classes are helpful for implementing any heading style while keeping the SEO appropriate heading tag for the text element. It's crucial to understand the heading style does not change the HTML heading tag of the element. It only changes the CSS styles applied to the element. Yeah, we can see this. This is the tag. We can see it's not changing. View H1, but the style is changing when we add the heading style H2 class. Okay. Applying the heading style class should not be used for most instances. Most of our headings should be without a class and follow the default. Our default heading style should be more common than heading variations. Okay, so we should keep everything consistent and not add unnecessary classes when we can. Avoid using a heading tag. We only want to use heading tags for headings. If there is text on the page that is not heading but needs heading styles, do not force a heading tag on the element. We want to keep our H1, H6 organized and used correctly for SEO. In this example, the monthly pricing is featured. We do not want to use the heading tag for this use case because it is not a heading with relevant content. However, we need the styles from H2. Okay, so we can see here the tag. It's a text, but we are adding the heading style H1, and it gets the styles from the H1, but remain the text tag. And now it's SEO optimized. Okay, I get it. Instead of using a heading tag for non-heading elements, we can use a text element and a custom class to style it. Okay, makes sense. Customizing the typography system. The official client first start project gives us a good starting point. It is not your final set of typography styles for the project. With each new project, we should update the style guide page based on the styles of the project. Okay, it's just a boilerplate, the style guide. And when we start a new project, we have to um, change the default styles that are in the style guide to our project styles. Okay, create a new utility class system. After we update all of the typography classes that comes with client first, we should consider adding new typography classes to the project. We can create new typography systems inside the utility class model. For example, if we are building a site with different values of opacity throughout the project, we can create a utility folder for typography opacity. Okay, we create this opacity folder inside the text folder. Okay, you can see here the folder structure. We have the utility classes, and inside there is a text folder with the opacity folder. And then we can change the opacity if we have different opacity for our text in our project. Okay, makes sense. We can create new folders inside the utility class folder for any CSS property we want to manage globally. Okay, I understand this. Makes sense. Create a new utility class to avoid deep stacking. In client first, we always want to avoid deep stacking classes. We can deep stack global utility classes to get the exact text customization we need. Okay. Can use a lot of utility classes to get the desired effect. Okay. There is a complete explanation of deep stacking in classes strategy 2. So we will learn more about this in the next chapter, maybe tomorrow. When deep stacking typography classes, we will have difficulty changing earlier classes in the list of stacked classes. Okay, if this combination of stacked classes is recurring in our project, we can consider creating a new utility class that represents the stacked class group. For example, we can take our example above and combine all systems to text style subtitle or text style alternative or any other name to describe the use case, the use of the combined styles. We can use this class each time this deep stacking use case occurs. Okay, we can see here we made everything from these classes inside this class, and now we can use this class to style this text. The folder name inside the text folder is our decision. We can use the style folder to hold these group styles, text style alternative. We can also create a new folder, text custom alternative. Okay, so for these custom styles, we can make another folder and not put everything in the style folder because there will be another utility classes. It's up to us how we will do it. Understand that the more we use this strategy, the less global our typography system becomes. We will have to take additional steps to change key global style properties. For example, if the properties of text size large was used to create text style subtitle, We want to update all text size large from 3 rem to 4 rem. We would need to make this change twice, once to text size large and once to text style alternative. Okay, because they will be connected, we'll have to make double changes. We no longer inherit text size large when we grouped our stacked classes to create text style alternative. Okay. We lose a lean global typography system if we abuse this strategies. Group style strategy. However, when used intelligently, it can help us work faster. Always make meaningful decisions when creating new utility classes of grouped style strategy. Okay, I think we'll get this more when we have more experience. It's not so easy to grasp this knowledge right now. I get it, but with the experience we will understand why and understand it better. Create a custom class. The utility class system will not work for every use case. Reasons: a custom class may be better for text. Unique and specific text, manage a particular grouping of text, customize responsive default. Okay. Create a custom class should not be a common practice for the project. Ideally, most of our classes fall into the utility typography system. However, sometimes a custom class is best. Below we identify 3 use cases where a custom class may be ideal. Okay, so basically we want to use the utility class whenever we can and as much as we can, and custom classes should be exceptional, only when we absolutely need it. Okay, specific text. When we have unique text that does not fall into our utility system, we can create a custom class to apply the exact styles required for the text. For example, footer copyright text. The copyright text is very small, has a special gray color, is all caps, and has different styling across breakpoints. It's a specific identifiable text element with a unique combination of styles. Creating this combination of styles may be possible to style with utility classes with 4 to 5 stacked classes. We never want to force a text element into the utility class system. Okay. It's quick and easy to use a custom class for this specific instance. Okay, we can see here the footer copyright text, and we give all these properties with this class instead of nesting a lot of utility classes. Makes perfect sense. Manage a particular grouping of text. With one style change, we can update all instances of the special grouping of text. Footer link example. For example, footer link. The footer link is seen 8 times in the footer of the project. Applying this one class to each of the footer links allows us to manage the group of the text together. Adjusting the size of the footer link text can be made to one item, and then footer link items will change with it. The ability to update all instances is beneficial for text with a high likelihood of responsive customization. Okay, basically we're creating this class, footer link, and then we style it, and then we just use this class for every other link in the footer, and they will get all the properties we made to this product link. Makes sense? Customize responsive default. Our utility typography system is ideal for maintaining default typography across all breakpoints. If text does not follow the default across all breakpoints, a custom class may help us achieve this customization. Here we can see custom class, and they change it based on the screen size. For example, the H1 on the page follows normal H1 styles on desktop and tablet. On mobile, the H1 text reduces size significantly. The H1 is a long string of text and the size must be adjusted for mobile. We can use a custom class to achieve this customization on lower breakpoints. For example, FAQ template heading text. Okay, so we are creating this class to make for the mobile breakpoint, to make it smaller. And I think we're done with the typography strategy. But we have two more sections for today, so we're going with the spacing strategy. Let's go. We're gonna finish the whole day from the learning path. We're gonna read everything and try to grasp the knowledge. Spacing strategy. Make intelligent spacing decisions inside client first. This documentation page explains strategies for applying spacing throughout our project. Intro spacing strategy. This page explains how to implement all spacing methods recommended by client first. Client first spacing strategy should bring more consistency to our project. We want to create less chaos and confusion. Our workflow and project quality improves if we use client first spacing strategies intelligently. We organize this docs page into two parts. Part 1 utility classes, part 2 custom classes. These utility classes are so important. They're the backbone of the framework. Utility classes. Part 1 of client first spacing is about global utility classes. We include several strategies for using utility classes inside the project. Different projects, use cases, and implementations may favor one strategy over another. Having multiple spacing strategies with utility classes gives us flexibility when building our projects. Client first utility class spacing gives us options for implementation. Okay. There are two options. Spacing block strategy, option 1, spacer classes, or option 2, padding classes. Option 2, spacing wrapper strategy, margin or padding classes. These utility class systems are included with the client first utility classes. Okay, spacing box strategy, option 1, spacer, size. Option 2, padding bottom plus padding size. In client first, spacing block is an empty div with utility classes that creates space between two sibling elements. Okay, so it's just an empty div. Add the div block to the page with the class spacer. Add content elements to the page as siblings of the spacing block. The spacing block creates space padding between elements. Yeah, we can see this. This is just an empty div block, and we gave it padding top 2 rem, and it creates this space between the heading and the paragraph, and between the paragraph and the button. Okay, spacing box can be used to create space between any elements vertically. So we are using it for vertical spacing. Option 1 or 2, the spacer system is similar to the padding bottom plus padding size system, and they both achieve the same outcome. Client first gives you the option to choose which implementation method works best for your workflow. The primary difference is that spacer classes use one class, while the padding-based classes use two classes. With the two class implementation, we apply padding bottom class direction and then add our padding medium class size in addition to it. Together, the two classes apply padding bottom to rem to the element. Okay, we can see here we have the padding bottom class first, the utility class padding bottom, and then we add the padding medium. We need to add 2 rem to the bottom. You can see this here. The decision to use one or the other is up to you as a developer. One benefit of the space request system is the option to add responsive variants. This is explained later in the page. Spacing wrapper strategy. Padding direction plus padding size. And margin direction plus margin size. In Climb first, a spacing wrapper is a div block that wraps a child element and creates space between a sibling element. Add a div block spacing wrapper to the page with two classes, margin padding direction plus margin padding size. So we give it direction and size basically. Nest a component element inside the spacing wrapper. Spacing wrapper creates space, margin or padding between itself and the sibling element. We add the div block to the page and apply margin bottom class direction and then add our margin medium class size in addition to it. Together the two classes apply margin bottom to rem to the element. Okay, we can see it here. So we have this div element that wraps our heading and we give it margin bottom direction and margin medium size. We can see the size is 2 rem. We nest an element inside the spacing wrapper to create space between the nested element and something else. And we create this space between the heading and the paragraph. I get it, it's easy. Use default global spacing values. Benefit, we keep our spacing values more consistent and unified throughout the project. Yeah, this is very important later for the responsive design. Very important. We want to unify our website spacing across sections and pages. If we're using 4rem, 8rem, 12rem as our primary spacing values across the project, we want those values to be consistent everywhere. Yeah, this helps so much with consistency. Everything looks professional and even. The more we use client-first utility spacing system, the more consistent our spacing will be throughout the project. Yeah, makes sense. We can see. Okay. Benefit. We have default and automatic spacing updates across tablet and mobile breakpoints. Super important. A spacing block or spacing wrapper automatically implements unified site-wide spacing adjustment across all breakpoints. If we apply spacing blocks and wrappers to 100 elements across the project, that's 100 fewer tablet and mobile styles we have to apply in our project. Yeah, it will be so easy to change. For each breakpoint level, elements spaced with blocks and wrappers will receive the default spacing values used across the project. Benefit, we can make global site-wide spacing updates throughout the project. Yeah, because when we make change to one of these classes, it will affect every every instance where we use this class inside our project. We can make all the change from here, from the style guide. Amazing. We can update many spacing values across the project with one CSS property value change. The update influences every element that uses a utility spacing class. For example, if a client say I want less spacing between all of the content, this update can be made relatively quickly by adjusting the global utility spacing values. Okay, I think this is one of the primary reason why we are using the spacing blocks. Workflow and scalability benefits. If we are using a utility class strategy, we can reduce the number of custom classes used for matching and padding CSS properties. Yeah, because you have to um, manually create every class and the spacing and the margin on every element. And now we can use our utility classes. And we won't have as many classes as if we started creating a new class for every element we customize. Very important. We want to reduce the number of custom classes created specifically for spacing. Spacing blocks and wrappers can help us create fewer classes in for our project. Exactly. I get this. We can rely on the utility class already created for the spacing. As we use the utility spacing system more, we will rely less on creating custom classes for spacing. Okay, we avoid deep stacking classes on top of an element. Client first is against deep stacking inside Webflow projects. We want to avoid deep stacking at all times. Spacing wrappers and blocks help us avoid deep stacking classes on our elements. Learn more about deep stacking. Want to learn more in class strategy part 2. If used correctly, spacing wrappers can help us work faster. Spacing blocks and wrappers in client first exist to help us work faster and maintain our project better. If we use wrappers and blocks, and this results in a slower workflow of our project management difficulty, we may be misusing spacing wrappers. So basically, when we learn how to use all the spacing wrappers and spacing blocks, we're gonna work faster. It's not required or recommended to use utility spacing everywhere. Applying margin and padding CSS properties directly to custom classes is acceptable. There are use cases where it's more efficient to apply spacing on a custom class. We discuss custom class use, second part of this article. Spacing of typography and buttons. This example we have an H3 paragraph and a button. We can create spacing for these elements without creating a new class. Let's see how. We use spacing blocks or wrappers to create space between each text element. Yeah, with the spacer medium, we just put this empty div block with 2rem padding, which helps us avoid creation of custom classes. Our typography strategy encourages that we use few or no custom classes on our typography elements. We want to avoid creating new custom classes specifically for spacing typography elements. Instead, we can pair our global typography strategy with our global spacing strategy to create text content layouts without custom classes. So far, I was doing this with, I was putting this content into a flex box, and then I was using the properties space between, and I was using the gap property. That's what I was doing. But here they are giving a different approach. We want to avoid margin or padding classes directly to text element. We will quickly approach deep stacking issues if we apply typography and spacing classes to text elements. Spacing blocks and wrappers help us avoid deep stacking. We do not want to do this. Okay, you see here, to this text we're giving text size large, text color gray, margin top. We're deep stacking utility classes, and it will be harder to manage. The spacing box solves the issue of stacking spacing classes on the text element. Here you can see with this div block, we are not we don't have to use the margin top and margin small by creating this padding bottom class with the padding medium size 2rem, and we create this space without adding 2 more utility classes to the text. With our spacing classes separated from our typography classes, we can manage each separately without the issue of deep stacking. Yeah, I get it. Spacing for reuse symbols and components. Benefit: we can create instance-specific spacing for symbols and components. When we want to apply spacing to symbols, the spacing must be applied to all instances of the symbol. Unified symbol spacing may be a problem if instances of our symbol require different spacing values. Using spacing blocks wrappers, we can have different spacing for different symbol instances. Okay. Yes. Here, margin top, margin medium. No combo class required, no new classes created, no custom CSS needed. Our spacing system gives us instance-specific spacing while using the core content stored in the symbol. Use cases of spacing box strategy. Create space between two elements. Spacing blocks are very useful when we create space between two elements. They are fast to implement, we have fewer nested levels, and our elements are more visible. See children in Navigator. Well, you can see the children here. This is one of the children. This is the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And we see the spacing diffs in between. Yeah, it makes sense. It's readable. When we use space blocks, we create a clear view in Navigator. We can see all elements of the component. Using too many spacing wrappers may hide too many of our important elements inside nested folders. Spacing blocks will create less nesting inside Navigator. Spacing blocks show our important elements more visibly in Navigator. Unique spacing for top and bottom of sections. When a section's padding top and padding bottom should be different, and we want to maintain the global utility class system, we can use spacing blocks. We can apply a padding large spacing block on the top of the section and padding small spacing block to the bottom of the section. Okay, we can see that. Padding top, padding large. This is the direction, this is the size. Okay. Use cases for spacing wrapper strategy. Use with CSS grid spacing strategy. Using the CSS grid spacing strategy, we can quickly create equal space between children elements. We can use spacing wrappers to create unique spacing for one element in the list. When spacing wrappers are used together with CSS grid strategy, we can apply custom spacing quickly with less effort. For example, a content item has one rem between each child element, except the last item in the list. We can apply margin top, margin small as a spacing wrapper for the last item in the list. Okay, we can see here the last item. When we put margin top and small, we're gonna create a separation between the paragraph and the button. Spacing wrappers allow us to use CSS grid spacing without creating multiple custom classes. So basically we're trying to do all of this, just not to create more custom classes. Keep our class folders clean. Are empty divs bad for the website? We are commonly asked about the impact of empty divs on spacing only divs used in the client first spacing system. Will search engines have trouble reading my website? Will I generate too many elements on the page? Will there be a problem with accessibility? Will my project be more difficult to maintain? The short answer, no. As long as the empty divs don't have any content or accessibility attributes, like area label, add to them, screen readers will omit them. Search engines will not be confused by blank divs either. An empty div with a CSS class is easy to identify by us humans and by search engines. Excessive DOM size is a common error alert found in many web performance tools. For example, Google's page speed insights. It is very unlikely that client-first paging system is the cause of this error. The most likely cause are layered animation, WOTI files, and embeds. This implementation can generate exponentially more DOM elements than client-first paging. A web page built with client-first guidelines has little or no impact in causing the excessive DOM size. Performance alert. Interested for the... Okay, there is an article here that we can read. I'll do it later. R2 custom classes. The client-first utility spacing classes are not the only implementation method for spacing on our site. We can apply margin and padding CSS properties directly to the custom class. That was what I was doing by now. And now I'm gonna learn the different approach, the utility class and the client-first way approach. Inside the custom class mindset, we present two spacing strategies. Custom class on element, CSS grid parent spacing. I was using this option a lot, the CSS grid parent spacing. It was very easy. Both strategies use a custom class to create space between elements. When we use custom classes for spacing, we should have a good use case for the custom class. Fewer custom classes equals more consistency in spacing. Custom class on element strategy. Custom class on element applies margin and padding values directly to the element that needs to be spaced. For example, we apply FAQ title to a heading that requires unique spacing, which the utility class system cannot achieve. CSS property of margin bottom 0.75 rem is applied directly to the FAQ title class. We can see it here. The class is created, FAQ title, and we gave the class 0.75 rem margin on the bottom. This graphic applies a custom class and custom spacing on the element. This strategy is the most flexible. We have total control of a specific element across all breakpoints. We must use this power with purpose. By overusing this strategy, we can create too many custom classes for spacing. This may result in disorganized project spacing system and many manual breakpoint updates. Yeah, basically, we should do this only when it's necessary. Because if we do this often, then it will be very hard to make the size responsive. CSS grid strategy. CSS grid spacing strategy applies CSS grid to a parent wrapper which creates space for the children inside it. We can create vertical and horizontal space between child elements using CSS grid. Instead of applying many blocks, wrappers, or custom classes on elements in the list, we can use CSS grid strategy to manage all children with one controller, the parent wrapper. Okay. Use cases custom class on element. Globally manage the spacing of a specific element. The keywords are of a specific element. When we have recurring elements that should have the same spacing value across the project, it may be best to use a custom class to manage the spacing. A custom class allows us to make spacing updates for this recurring element. Global spacing wrappers on recurring elements may slow us down and make project management more difficult to manage. We can ask ourselves two important questions to understand if we should use utility class spacing or a custom class for a specific element. How many instances of this element are in the project? If there are many instances of this specific element, the element is a recurring element in the project. We can target each instance by using a custom class. So basically, if we make one custom class, we can use it to the other elements that are recurring in our project. For example, if there are 25 instances of this element in the project, we can use one custom class to target all 25 instances. Like the footer link. I think the footer link is a good example. How do we want to manage each instance of element? If we want to manage each instance of this recurring element as one group, a custom class will help us target that group of elements and apply changes to the group globally. Custom class on input example. Let's look at the example use case with form inputs in our project. Form inputs are used across 4 pages of the project. The setup below shows each form input separated by a spacing block. This strategy is used across the entire project. It is spacing block, direction bottom, size small. If you wanted to reduce the spacing between each form input, we need to update each spacing block individually. Get it? This example above is not ideal, as this change may take unnecessary effort to update each form in the project. We must go input by input to update the spacing block value. A change to our form inputs across the project can take seconds and require little effort with the proper setup. Custom class on the form input will allow us to manage our form input elements as one unified element group. This screenshot shows each form input with margin bottom 1 rem applied to it. You can see here the form input class, and we just created the padding and the properties, and now everywhere we put the form input class, it will get these styles. If we want to change the space between each input, we can make a single change to the form input class. Changing the margin will change the value for all inputs across the project. This example is ideal if you want all force inputs in the project to have a unified margin bottom 1rem value. We have complete global control of spacing this specific element. We can change every form input on the page and across the project with a single change of form input margin bottom CSS property. Okay, tablet and mobile spacing sizes. Spacing blocks and wrappers have the powerful benefit of maintaining default spacing across all breakpoints. However, we may not want default spacing across all breakpoints. Sometimes we have elements that require unique spacing on tablet, mobile, or bot. In this case, spacing blocks and wrappers will make our customizations more difficult. Client first utility class spacing is designed to unify spacing across all breakpoints. The system does not allow for customizations across breakpoints. We can apply spacing directly to the custom class if we need spacing customizations across breakpoints. The custom class will allow us to manage the spacing across each breakpoint. You can see here the FAQ title. We give different properties across the different breakpoints. Okay. Unique one-off spacing. Sometimes we have an element that needs unique spacing. It's not part of a group of other elements and doesn't have any specific mobile customizations. It's an element that requires a single one-off spacing. For example, a client insists that global padding small is too small and padding medium is too large. They want something in the middle. Instead of forcing this unique one-time off into the utility spacing system, we can create a custom class for the element and continue with our build. For example, we can create about testimonial title with margin bottom 2.225 rem as one of spacing class. See here, this is the class, and we add the property like this margin. When we are not clear On integrating the utility spacing system into the layout, we can create a one-off spacing. It's important to understand that the more we create one-off custom class for spacing, the less we follow a globally unified spacing system. This should not be a common practice for every element. Okay, so we should do this only when we absolutely need to. Use class. CSS grid spacing. Spacing children elements in a list. The core use case of CSS grid is spacing items in a list. When there are sibling elements that need the same space between each other, applying CSS grid to a parent wrapper is an efficient way to space these elements. CSS grid footer links. Let's look at an example use case with links in the footer. We have a parent wrapper called footer links column that wraps footer links. We can apply display grid with rows to create equal space between all footer links. If you want to change the space between each footer link, we can make a single change to the footer links column class. Adjusting the row distance will adjust the space between all footer links. See here, we have the footer links column. We're giving a gap. We're creating a space here. Yeah, makes sense. I know this way. I use that when I try to build my website from scratch. This was mostly what I was using. Wrappers, and then manipulating the space with the grid or flex properties. This is an excellent strategy for a list of items that require spacing. One adjustment gives us flexible control of the spacing between the elements. Yeah, it's very easy to use. CSS grid content cart example. CSS grid spacing also work with children of content items. We have content cart items nested inside the list. Each content cart has elements nested in it. We can apply CSS grid directly to the content cart to space the icon, title, and paragraph inside it. Yeah, we have the benefits item, this card. We have this class, turn it into the grid. Then we manipulate the space with the gap property. CSS grid is applied to the benefit and then elements inside are influenced. We can adjust the CSS grid row values and adjust all benefit item count together with one controller. This strategy works very well if the spacing between each child element is equal. In our example, the spacing between each child element of the benefits item is 1 rem. This scenario fits perfectly into CSS grid row controls. To add a child element with different spacing values, the CSS grid, we can use our utility class spacing wrapper method together with the CSS grid method. In the example below, we add a button to the content card. This button requires 3 rem distance below the paragraph. This does not work with the grid values applied to benefits item. We can add a spacing wrapper under the paragraph that wraps the new button. Here we can see how we are using the spacing div. Now spacing wrapper, padding top, padding medium is creating additional space within the benefits item CSS grid system. Spacing wrappers are excellent for using CSS grid spacing strategy with flexibility and variation. This works well for creating global controlled content spacing. The benefits item may be a recurring component throughout the site. The benefits item cards have a CTA, some don't have a CTA, and some may have entirely new elements. We can keep a global and unified benefits item spacing with our CSS grid controls while taking advantage of instance-specific elements and spacing variations. Okay, I get it, I understand it. Responsive spacing. Create responsive spacing variants in the spacer class system. Spacer system uses only one class, so adding a second class to create a responsive variant combo class is client first approved. The two class strategies already have two classes applied to an element. Adding a third would start to create a long stack of classes, 3 classes. More importantly, creating a combo class from a stack of classes that is likely to change is not a good combo. Not a good combo class creation strategy. We discourage and avoid responsive variants on two-class spacing block and spacing wrapper strategies. Okay, spacer. Tablet and mobile flexibility. Use is combo classes to make customizations to base breakpoints utility spacing. If an element needs spacer large, but a small breakpoint needs a unique spacing size, we can add a combo class to the spacer class to customize our breakpoint spacing. For example, if we need smaller space on mobile only, we can use spacer large is mobile small. If the responsive customization is focused on a specific element, we can be more specific with our combo class naming, such as spacer large is home tabs. The use of a combo class allows us to maintain global utility spacing across desktop and then make instance-specific customizations for smaller breakpoints. Okay, spacing tips. Adding section size. Adding section size is a set of utility classes that helps us manage top and bottom padding for sections globally throughout the project. The padding section utility class should be used on the div block with the padding global class applied to reduce nesting elements as example below. So inside this padding utility class, we put this padding section large. It gives 8 RAM on the top and bottom, 2.5 RAM on the left and right. Okay, this is a hybrid approach between custom class and utility class. We can manage all of our sections spacing as global utility class. A new folder called section is added to our padding utility class. So we have padding, section, and then the size. Padding section small, padding section medium, padding section large. Yeah, exactly. If a section's vertical padding is something custom or unique, we can recommend it. Use spacing box to create unique space on the top and bottom of the section. This method maintains the utility spacing system. Apply the unique padding to the outer section layer. Section. Okay. Optionally, so we can also add it here. Optionally, add margin on heading tags. We may want each heading tag to have the same amount of space above and below. We want to unify the spacing in our typography system. For example, every H2 in the project has margin bottom 2 rem. Okay. Get it? We select all H2 headings and then give it 2 rem margin on the bottom. Applying margin to the heading tag is an effort to unify spacing above and below our heading tags. This is how we create global spacing rules for our typography. Margin on heading tags work well if we have design control over the project. We can choose to have a very formalized spacing system. This is a method to unify typography in the project further. If we are working on a website with many variations, headings and how headings are used in design, this may not be a good strategy. If we continue overriding the default heading margin values, we create more work for ourselves. If all of or most headings should follow the same margin across the project, this may be an effective strategy. We have a full explanation this typography spacing method in typography strategy. Okay, flexure grid for buttons and button rows. Use Use CSS Flex or Grid to create simple button layouts. Button with icon example. Create a button with text and icon. Apply Flex or Grid to button element to create space between the text and the icon. Okay, we can see this. There is a button class. We turn it into grid with columns and rows. We choose the row. Okay, this is a quick and simple way to implement a button with multiple nested elements. Button row example. Create horizontal space between two buttons. Apply the horizontal space between the buttons through the parent wrapper. Okay, so this is the wrapper, the button group. This is the direction. Using Flex or Grid on the parent wrapper, the buttons, we can create horizontal space between the buttons. Applying margin right directly to the button class will limit how we can use our button. We want our button to work in all instances, not only in a row of buttons. Applying spacing box for horizontal margin may not work well for mobile. Many mobile designs require specific horizontal spacing. Spacing box do not allow us to make adjustments for mobile design. We believe Flex or Grid for creating space in a row of buttons is ideal. Okay, we're using Flex or Grid when we are creating buttons and button groups. Avoid using utility padding to create size for inner elements. We don't recommend using the utility classes to create padding around the item content. This strategy works in terms of CSS and may achieve our required result, but we want to avoid this practice. It encourages deep class stacking and mobile styling conflicts. Okay, so we are not using the padding large utility class to style this card. Usually the padding for inner elements will need specific size customizations through each breakpoint. Client first spacing system has no control of spacing values across breakpoints. Instead, apply the inner element padding directly on the custom class. Okay. Create a custom class folder of spacers. The term spacer can be used for custom classes as well. We formally use it as a utility class system spacer. We can also use it as a custom class to manage all custom unique spacings across the project. If there is a recurring element where spacing should be managed globally, we can use spacer element to manage that custom element spacing. This new spacer folder is useful for organization of all custom element specific spacing that should be kept global. You can see it here, spacer header, spacer sticky nav. Okay, we can use this spacer folder for anything, even something custom like spacer home FAQ. Okay, makes sense. And that's it for the spacing strategy. We learned a lot. And there is one final chapter in the day 2 of the learning path. It's the utility class systems. Super important. Review the utility class systems included with the official client first project clonable. We start each project with this set of utility classes. And let's go. Utility class systems. Review the utility class systems included with the official client first project clonable. We start each project with this set of utility classes. So here is a clonable somewhere. Client first clonable. You can find the client first clonable in Google. In the next days, we're gonna open it and go through it very thoughtfully. We have to master it. So we're gonna get, oh, here, we can see the get clonable here on the top right. We should get it and um, study it very deeply. For now, let's just continue with the documentation. Soon I will start creating projects with the client first. And we're gonna use this clonable a lot. Or maybe the Reloom clonable, because Reloom is client first as well. So it's basically the same. Following the same naming conventions. I don't know if the utility classes are styled the same way, like they are in the clonable from the client first. But we will see. Okay, let's continue. Client first clonable includes utility classes and styles that help us start any Webflow project. The classes are not specific to any website, design, style, or layout. Utility classes manage important CSS properties used throughout many pages, sections, or elements. So basically the utility classes are properties, style properties that we are giving to our elements. Some utility classes allow us to make powerful global changes to elements throughout the build. For example, a class that applies universal horizontal padding. Some classes are for improved workflow. For example, a class that applies display none. It's important to know that all included utility styles inside Client First are optional. If the build requires us to organize spacing differently or use a unique structure for outer page structure, we may do it. We find that most projects work very well with the utility classes inside Client First. So we can edit our utility classes, create new utility classes if our project needs it. Okay. Most important utility systems. The primary global utility class systems come with Client First, core structure, typography, and spacing. We have identified these as our most essential global use cases when building in Webflow. Each global utility class system has a dedicated strategy page to explain how we use it. Structure defined flexible core structure we can use on all of or most pages. Global horizontal padding. Global horizontal padding means left and right padding on page content. Padding global. We can see both left and right. This 2.5 frame gives this padding left and right. Container size, global max width values that serve as max width containers for content. Container large, container medium, container small. You can see here properties, width, max width. Learn more about core structure and core structure strategy. We already know this code. Section padding. Section padding manages global vertical spacing system for sections. Padding section small, padding section medium, padding section large. The padding section utility class should be used on the div block with the padding global class applied to reduce nesting elements as example below. Yeah, we already know that. Typography. Client first includes a global utility system for headings, typography sizing, coloring, and customization. Okay, already know that. Well, we always use the HTML tag to define default styles, body, h1, h2, h3, so on. How we change styles with our project. Heading style switch. Change the default heading style. Use class prefix heading style on h1, h2, h3 or any other piece of text to change the text to a specific heading size. For example, if you have an h2 that should be styled like h3, we can use h2 for SEO purposes and apply heading style h3 to the element. We see here we have the tag, the h2 tag, and we gave it a different style, but the tag is not changing. So when a Google crawler come to our website, they will see this is h2 and it's an important message that we want to communicate to our audience. Super important for the accessibility and for SEO. Text size. Use class prefix text size on a text element to change the size of the text. Text size large, text size medium, text size regular, text size small, text size tiny. Yeah, we can use utility classes to change the size, text style. You can use the text style to change the style, two lines, all caps. Text weight. There's a text weight with the text classes. Text bold, semi-bold, normal, light. Text alignment. Text align left, text align center, text align right. You can see everything. Okay, text color primary, secondary, alternate. We just change the colors by giving a utility class to our text. Amazing. Buttons use class prefix secondary button text. Button is secondary, changing, spacing. Spacing system that keeps vertical and horizontal spacing available on our website. To learn more about margin and padding classes, strategy, we already know about this. Margin direction, margin top, bottom, left, right, horizontal, vertical, margin size, tiny, XX small, XX small, large, X large. How it works. Here we are giving a direction utility class and then a size utility. Here we have a wrapper. We wrapped the element, the heading or the paragraph element. We wrapped it. This div, then we give the div these utility classes, and this is how we manipulate the spacing. Padding direction, padding top, bottom, left, right, horizontal, padding size, tiny, large, huge. Works. Here the properties changing depending on the direction and the size. Move all spacing, sets all margin and padding to 0. Useful for if we have component spacing. Spacing clean. Okay, so we add this spacing clean and it is the margins. Good. I think this is gonna be useful. Useful utility system. Utility classes we like to use in most of our products to build faster. Responsive height. Show and hide elements by screen size. Hide on all devices, hide tablet, hide from tablet resolution, hide mobile landscape, hide from mobile landscape resolution, hide mobile portrait, hide from mobile portrait. So maybe when we have a very huge picture or something that's large, we can just hide it on the smaller screen sizes. Display inline flex. Apply CSS properly display inline flex, which is not a supported CSS property in Webflow. Display inline flex sets display inline flex at base desktop breakpoint. Okay, we use this when we want to set the element to the base desktop breakpoint. Play inline text. We have to memorize this. case, using CSS property display flex is important in our project. However, display flex causes elements to take up 100% of the space by default. This makes it difficult to use flex box for buttons. Display line flex allows elements to behave as inline while maintaining flex capabilities inside them. Okay, so for buttons we use this display inline flex. Max width. Add max width to any elements on the page. Use container classes for the primary outer context max width. Use max width classes for max width cases nested within the container. Max width XX large, max width X large, max large, medium, small, X small. Okay. Yes. Max width. Oh, that's max width. None. Max width full. Sets max width to none. Max width full tablet sets max width to none on tablet. Mobile for portrait. Landscape portrait. Okay. Here the properties how they're changing. Icon sizes. That's a height or height and width of icons. Icon 1 by 1. That's both width and height values. Useful for social icons, company logos, footer assets, etc. Icon height small, icon height medium, icon height large, icon 1 by 1 small, 1 by 1 medium. How the size is changing. Okay, background colors. Background colors. Help apply recurring background color CSS property in our project. Yeah, I think this is something we're gonna use a lot. Background color primary, secondary, alternate. We just add the utility class and the color is changing. Useful utilities to build with. More advanced use, not required to use. Okay, these are utilities. Index, align center, layer, pointer events none, pointer events auto, overflow hidden. These are very important, I think. Overflow scroll, overflow auto, aspect ratio square, aspect ratio portrait, and so on. Global embed. Client first comes with a simple embed block that holds our global site-wide custom CSS styles. This embed block symbol should go on every page of the project. Okay, this makes total sense. Because when I was building my website from scratch, I did some changes into the page settings. I wrote some custom code there for the CSS and JavaScript to make my border animations. And I wasn't able to see the changes into the designer. And that's why we're using the global embed. So we can see all the changes. The designer, let's see. Right? Custom CSS styles are best implemented through the native embed block, not page settings or site settings in code. Styles are added to an embed so we can see the CSS inside designer. The ability to see our CSS inside the designer canvas is the primary reason we use the simple embed block instead of site settings. I think Webflow should make it somehow. Like when you change the code in the site settings, you can see the preview canvas and in the preview mode and the canvas. When the code is in site settings, we can only see the CSS the published site. When the CSS styles are in embed inside designer, We can see these styles visually while we work inside Designer. In most cases, it's preferred to see custom styles directly inside Designer. Can make sense. You have more control, you see what's happening. Update a few Webflow default size styles. We have several styles inside the theme, but override default Webflow styles, which we prefer not to have in our project. Okay. Build for adjustments and updates. Define first utility styles and the global embed block styles can be changed based on our project. The clonable starter project includes comments each style inside the embed. If we're unsure what the custom CSS does, leave it and do not delete it. Each line, the global embed, therefore is likely beneficial to the project. Learn more about the global embed. The global embed page explains each CSS snippet, the embed. Understand each snippet's use case and why it's part of the client first clonable. Okay, we're gonna take a look at the global embed page maybe tomorrow. I think we're done for today, guys. We learned a lot. This class strategy 2 is part of the day 3 of their learning path to master the client first framework. So we're gonna continue tomorrow with the day 3. I think we learned a lot today about the typography strategy, the spacing strategy, the utility class strategy, and I am very happy with what I learned today. So thank you for watching, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.